Firstly, let's detach from our egoic labels, our profession, our politics, etc. And let's dwell on the constructive fact that we all share the same aliveness. From this perspective, we're going to quickly break down the economic stratification of a modern developing society. So there are 4 areas: the ruling elite, the economically productive, the economically non-productive, and the systemic victims. The ruling class broadly comprises people like judges, lawyers, politicians, lobbyists, police chiefs, military officials, and the economically productive area is made of 3 components. Workers, these are the biggest in number and arguably the most valuable component because they actually create the wealth by creating a product or service. For example, carpenters build homes, bakers make bread, farmers feed you, and midwives deliver babies. These are all valuable tasks for the survival and maintenance of the human race. Next, we have what we'll broadly call the managers. These are people like consultants, management professionals, departmental directors, etc. And they can only really tweak things, improve efficiency a bit, by organising the workers and capital in productive ways. And finally, in the economically productive area, we have entrepreneurs, who are individuals or corporations who have money to invest and want to make a profit. The more they squeeze the workers, the more profit they make, and the more power they will ultimately get over the ruling elite. And thus the more limited competition will become. Without the workers, the managers have nothing to manage, and the entrepreneur capitalists are left with a large sum of money and a good idea, but nobody to actually deliver it. In terms of status, the workers are misled to believe they are low status compared to the ruling elite. But in terms of importance, the opposite is true, because the workers carry everyone else on their shoulders. I'll explain why that happens in a moment. Penultimately, we have the non-economically productive area of society, and the circumstance in this area means, for whatever reason, there's no new economic wealth being generated from this area of society. For example, kids shouldn't be exploited to work, pensioners are in retirement, workers and management who can't find suitable positions are unemployed, the sick and disabled are at a disadvantage, and don't forget the prisoners who have been violently incarcerated in the naive hope from the state that they will learn their lesson. And of course, this approach of state violence doesn't work, and they all go out and reoffend on the whole. And finally, we have the systemic victims, which regularly fall out the arse end of this social construct. And don't forget, we are all born into the system, and these victims are too, and they have been abused, ignored, and thus they are a product of the system and its flaws. These will be homeless people, abandoned ex-soldiers, mental and physical abuse victims, and so on. So, let's look at the cash flow of new wealth in society. There are lots of people dependent on government, but in terms of benefit, welfare, food stamps, social security, and so on, in the non-economically productive area of society, where does that wealth come from? Right? Who pays for it? It comes from the government, right? No. It passes through the grubby hands of government, but they pay themselves handsomely for it. The government doesn't bake bread, it doesn't do carpentry, it doesn't do midwifery. So the government generates zero wealth itself. Its sole task is to organise society, and it fails at that quite comprehensively, looking at the massive wealth gap as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So where does the government take its money from? Well, if it goes to the economically productive area of society and says, I, the government, declare that you will give me a bunch of your wealth, and if you have a problem with that, I will send some well-dressed, well-spoken, violent thugs around to beat you up or lock you up. Give me the money, punk! Of course, that reality is many steps removed, and for many people the very threat of that state violence through legal action is enough to allow the government to dip its hand into your pocket in the form of income tax, sales tax, national insurance, taxes on your savings, taxes on your dividends, value-added tax, extra tax on alcohol, fuel and energy bills, corporation tax, capital gains tax, the list goes on. So once the government has stolen your real wealth, the government takes a bunch for itself, gives plenty to the international banking globalists, and funds its own government growth and projects, and hands the remainder, what's left, down to the non-economically productive area of society, the pensioners and the kids and so on, who need it to meet their basic human needs. Food, shelter, water, warmth, and on the whole, they don't get much. And in the UK, as elsewhere in the world, this is being reduced further with austerity measures. So, what is tax incidence? Well, this is basically translated as, with whom does the buck stop? So let's find out. So we know the non-economically productive area of society gets its money from the government, and government takes it from the economically productive area of society. So to test with whom the buck stops, let's say the government raises a tax. The corporations and the entrepreneurs will simply pass on the tax rise in the price of its goods and services, or if they're powerful enough, they will just lobby the government for some kind of loophole, and the managers might be able to give themselves and the workers a pay rise if things are looking rosy and there's economic growth. If there's not much money left and things are looking dire, who do you think will benefit between the employers and the managers when it's the managers who decide on who gets what? It's a no-brainer. So the employees are always the ones that lose out in a situation of decline. So tax incidence falls squarely on the shoulders of the workers and to some extent the managers, because these are the productive people who fundamentally create the wealth and have little or no way of getting out of paying taxes, unlike the big corporations do. And I hope that explains how the current system is parasitic, benefiting mainly only the ruling elite. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching.